EM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, I guess I should say. I have some friends over in New Zealand that are paying attention in Australia, so I think it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, Brian. I think it's like 3 o'clock in the morning over there. So, well, two things. We don't have Dan today with us. He got called in, the emergency management acting practitioner, got called in by the president of his college for an issue that they're dealing with over there. So, Dan, we understand. And Stacy Battalion Chief Gerlich from LA City Fire Department is unable to make it with us today as well. So guess what? You got me, and sounds terrible when I say it that way. And then we have Mark Baker. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chad, thanks for having me.
Sound like you're like a backup to the backup, the way I announced that.
Hey, they say the best for last, I think, right?
So anyway, so we're going to be kind of something we got going on here. I talked about it last week. The idea that we've come up with Mark and the Mark's, as he's calling it, the Baker's Dozen of the books for the year, which I love that title, by the way. And so we're going over books of the year, book of the month, I suppose. And this month we're going to be discussing Leadership is a Relationship. We're going to get into that in a minute, but first let's talk about Mark. So Mark has a great sordid history, and we'll bring this. So Mark, first of all, I love the journey to emergency management and how people got to where they are at. And how did you get to emergency management? And we can talk about when you were first born all the way up to today, if you like.
For start with first board, I have to include my prior history with the police as a kid, but we'll just start when I came in the Army. So yeah, I joined the Army, straight out of high school, 17. Hard charger, started off as a artilleryman, but quickly realized I wanted more and became a military policeman to expand my pursuit of personal goals, which was, ultimately I wanted to be in life. I wanted to be a soldier and or a cop, and I wound up doing both, and I figured that out. So that's where it took me into military police. Did that and moved on. 24-year career. Did a bunch of things. Had a bunch of experiences. Learned a whole lot. Picked up some leadership traits on the way that were incredibly valuable. And then, that time, ultimately, every soldier's career comes to an end one way or another. It was time for me to move on and decide what I wanted to be when I truly grew up. I was pursuing education at the time in my later years in the Army, and my path to study was criminal justice, homeland security, which led me into emergency management and exploration around the time of retirement. Ultimately decided emergency management was the field I wanted to get into. It's the best fit for my skills and abilities and my passions and desires as well. So I did that, and I developed a transition plan on the way out of the Army, which included education, going back to school and getting a certificate in emergency management to show up my master's degree, criminal justice, homeland security, and then diving into the plethora of IS classes that are available and out there, and digging into those. As I was going on along with my transition plan, I quickly realized, I'm gaining the education and I'm gaining the knowledge, but I don't have the experience still. So how do I fill that experience gap to be a marketable person coming into the EM field? And I went two different ways. I went with the volunteer organizations, linking up with Team Rubicon, and for volunteer experience and disaster response. And then ultimately, the best way to gain stories and experiences is through other people's, and that's where I started really diving into the EM related leadership style books, which it's been incredible. It's been a truly valuable way of gaining experience without actually getting out there being able to do it.
Right.
It's just learning from other stories and lessons learned along the way, and just using it as an overall development tool as the whole development package of me as I am now.
It's kind of, that story is great because one of the things we're talking about here today, and this is what we were going to talk with Stacy about, is the idea of transitioning after retirement. And then there's another side of it too, which I think is really exciting too, is transitioning after military service, right? And one of the things we've been working hard on here, and I know Dr. Randy Collins with the All Hazard Incident Management team, Bryce Bartlett as well. He's been working on things with the idea, retired First Sergeant for the United States Marine Corps, and a couple other veterans group in this group are working on what it is a transition from the military and how do we transition those guys with great skills, guys and gals, right? Great skills into emergency management. And I think Team Rubicon specifically has been doing an outstanding job helping veterans transition from the military into civilian service when it comes to emergency management specifically. Now, with that, there's a couple programs that Team Rubicon has, and I'd like to kind of talk to you a little bit about that as well, if you're willing to. You are you are a Clay Hunt Fellow. What is the Clay Hunt Fellowship, and how did that help you with your transition?
Todd, I'm always willing and excited to talk about Team Rubicon. But I have such a passion for them. It's incredible just what they do and what they provide for veterans and the communities they serve. But the Clay Hunt Fellowship Program is it's a leadership development program, but it goes about it with a slightly different approach, in that it's a self-exploration of the leader, the person going through the program. It's an exploration of what really makes you tick. What are your strengths? We do strength finders. We have a discussion point, and it's that, and along the way, you develop this incredible community of support for transition. Because those of us who've been through it, you come out of the Army and it's like this extremely structured, or the military, you come out extremely structured, extremely kind of safe environment, and pick you up. There's always a safety net. But then you go out to the civilian world where it's not there. You're out there, and you can feel vulnerable at times, and that's not a bad thing. It's learning how to harness that vulnerability and see it as a strength, and that's kind of what Clay Hunt does with that program. It does a real good job at not only identifying your strengths, but then teaching you how to see vulnerability as a strength. And that was really eye-opening for me, and I learned a lot through that. Met some really great people in that fellowship.
So with leadership specifically, and I had a conversation with my class yesterday, and Dr. Craig Hansen's is listening today too, and we had a discussion regarding leadership specifically in emergency management, and why I believe specifically that we need to really develop emergency managers with leadership skills. And Dr. Kelly Garrett from EMI, he's been doing some great work in this area as well. Again, Dr. Randy Collins, he's been doing some great work in the leadership side of things. Why is it important for emergency managers to hone their leadership skills?
Yeah, you never know what situation you're going to be thrown into. And you don't get just thrown into as another cog in the wheel. When you come with that title, emergency manager, there's a little bit of expectation there for you to be able to step up and take charge and build collaborative teams and reach out and pull people in to work towards a collective. And those leadership skills they pay off greatly if you have them built up, and they can also hurt you if you don't. You definitely can't go into a room full of fire chiefs, police chiefs, and bring everybody together with a authoritarian. Am I saying that word? You can't be super stern with them. You have to be collaborative in order to build that cooperation within the teams, and it has to be kind of. You ain't got much time to do it, so you got to do it pretty quick too, and especially when you're talking about incident management. Leadership, your leadership skills in emergency management are likely make or break your success and your efforts in whatever you're trying to do. I just believe it's an incredibly valuable tool for an emergency manager to be a leader. It's in the title, right? You substitute manager with leader.
Right.
There you go.
You know what I find interesting too is I've had the opportunity to lead volunteers, right? Whether it's the CERT program, the Volunteer Disability Services, the RACES guys, the guys who do volunteer communicators, those groups and others, right? And also part of Team Rubicon as well. And what I think is interesting too is if you want to learn really how to lead a group of people, lead a group of people that are doing stuff for free that can just walk away because they're not getting paid to be there. They're not listening to you because their paycheck depends upon it. They're listening to you because you get this position and they want to follow you. And I think that's a great place to learn to lead. What was your experience on compared to leading troops compared to leading volunteers?
No, you're right. I totally got. So I did CERT too. CERT was kind of parallel to Team Rubicon at the same time, but yeah, that was a definite learning curve. You have to come in humble. You have to come in and you have to really explain and display the return of investment that volunteers are getting in their time and effort that they're donating, and then you have to really start and convince them of the why they're doing it. If they don't understand that, they don't get it. They're just showing up, and they don't get the most sexiest jobs. And when they come to the scene, they're out at a point of distribution and handing out water or PPE or whatnot. But it's important stuff, and it's important that they understand what they're doing and how it impacts the community. And if that was the challenge, because you're right, as an NCO, as a leader in the Army, I had a certain level of authority that came with that. And people were going to follow me, even if they didn't like to or want to, because they were obligated to. But the best experiences I had leading, even in the Army, was those times where you developed a team that wanted to follow you, that had their heart in it, and they were committed to what you were doing, and you as a leader. And that's the skill that translates well into the civilian world, and especially volunteers, is convincing folks to accomplish a mission, by providing purpose, direction, motivation, just like in the NCO creed, and then change that into why. When they buy into it, like when you see Team Rubicon go out there and get at it, clear roads and live in austere environments and serve communities with the passion they have, it's amazing. And you have to respect that, and that's a tremendous responsibility for the leader too, is to maintain that and not spoil that experience by poorly leading.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is really a great transition into the book that you chose for this month. And it's called Leadership is a Relationship, and I have a copy of it here. If you can see, it's tabbed up a little bit. And Mark and I, before we went on the air, talking about how I show him your book too.
Yeah, same thing.
So, okay, why did you choose this book? And well, first of all, why did you choose the book? And then why don't you just give a quick synopsis of it, and we'll get into some of the lessons learned.
So I chose this book. When I developed my reading list, I try to alternate between leadership and emergency management experiences within books. This was a leadership in the rotation, and specifically with this book, I was looking at trying to get a kind of a civilian perspective of relationship, and try and get in, explore the stories that are within that, and if they differ from the military. But then as soon as I started reading, I quickly realized that there's a lot of military leadership traits that are discussed in the book as well. But yeah, that was my biggest pick, because I always want to keep sharp the leadership tool that I have in my toolbox, and looking for ways to develop and continue development as a leader. So that was my biggest reason for choosing this book. Just looking to get those additional lessons and perspectives.
So back of the jacket, description of what this book's about, and then we'll get into what your lessons are.
Yeah, so the book is about leading on a more personal level. So getting to know your employees, or the people that you're asking to follow you, and truly understanding them, and leveraging the strengths that are necessary to build those personal relationships, to create a platform for leadership. This book went into and explained different perspectives. We talked about how athletes lead other athletes. You don't have to be a leader. You don't have to be in a leadership position to be a leader. And there's ways to lead. Well, in those positions, this gets into perspectives of even CEOs of corporations of leading, and then of course the military aspect of it.
What I got out of the book, what I find interesting is the accountability aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
And that holding everybody in that group, including yourself as a leader, accountable for things. And I know that I've talked about this before with um, um, the extreme ownership, right? With that book, where the idea is extremely owning your actions, specifically like your business, whatever you're doing. Um, that is, I think, is really, it's very similar, right? Is holding accountability up and down a chain, is that you are keeping yourself accountable. But when it comes to leadership, and this is my perspective on this, and this is and I think maybe you pick this up as well as with through Team Rubicon, and through things that you've done through your life, is realistically the best leadership style. I shouldn't say that. That's really value judgment here. My personal favorite leadership style, right, for me, is that the idea of the servant leader. And even if you read Calls on Chaos, realistically, that was servant leadership, making sure that your troops, making sure that people that are under you have the right tools and assets and everything to get the job done, and open doors for them. And it's never ever about you. It's always about them. And that's what I got out of this book, by the way.
Yeah, no, I definitely picked up the same message as you, and I quickly related because I like how the book kind of broke it down into different attributes. Each chapter had a different attribute, and accountability being the first one. I quickly went to in the Army, right? I went back there and I thought about PT, right, and leaderships, and being accountable to your team based on your physical ability, and taking the proper initiative to do the extra work, do the work when no one's looking, in order to be prepared for whatever may come. And that's kind of, I went back to there with that one. Also, with checking yourself. You got to be accountable for yourself. You're always going to count for those who you're responsible for. You're gonna good or bad. You're gonna own it. But yourself, that's a big one too.
Yeah, I found that through this, and just to kind of clarify, when they're saying that leadership is a relationship, they're not saying that you need to be, friends with the people that work for you. Matter of fact, it's probably just the opposite. You know what I mean by that is, like, you can be friendly with them, but there's sometimes you have to make decisions that are outside of that whole being friends with them. But the other side of it, though, is it has to be a mutual respect between those that are following you, and you to them, right? Both ways on that sheet. Well, how do you see that happening, with this? How do you take this book, take the lessons learned, and really make it practical and deploy them to what you do today?
You have to care. I think you have to lead with understand. Remember, did you do that in the military where you got to a new unit, you fill out this long personal data bio sheet, your hobbies and all that stuff? I
Yeah,
used to, I used to think how crazy that was and why I had to do that everywhere I went. But it makes sense, right? It makes sense that you understand what makes your people tick, and what they care about and where they want to go. And in turn, you're going to get a more loyal uh, employee and dedicated to the mission that and the goals and objectives that you're trying to achieve. I think this book, the big takeaway is leading on a deeper level, of understanding between you and your employee. You got to understand when that employee comes in, you know, and is having a bad attitude, poor performance. There's probably an underlying reason for that,
right.
And if you take the time to care and invest into understanding your employee's particular situation or circumstance or what drives them, and you take that extra effort to understand them, I think you're just going to overall get a better output altogether from your employee or your teammates, whoever you may be working with.
Yeah, absolutely. The team failure, right, isn't the team members. It's the
Right.
it's the leadership. That's the top. You know, I actually had a meeting yesterday with my team. With and we were having this conversation regarding um, some communication issues that occurred, and basically was saying, "Hey, look, this is where it's at, and I have to take personal ownership, me as the leader, of not giving better direction to the team, and that's where it's so instead of saying, "Hey, you guys screwed up," right? It was like, "Hey, where did I fail to direct you in the right way?" And so taking that ownership of the failure to the top instead of blaming your team, I think is something that you have to do when you reflect on an issue that's going on.
Yeah, and that kind of leads right into probably the next attribute, forgiveness, right? You have to lead and if you get it in there, live with forgiveness, and that's a continuous thing. The misunderstanding of a task, the failure to deliver on a product, uh, just creating an environment of trust and worry that you can make mistakes and learn from them and not have retribution from them. I think that's a big piece too of this book was that I took away was that forgiveness chapter, and that especially when they said it's a continuous effort, it's a continuous thing. You got to continually forgive. It's not just waiting for the big things to happen. It's ongoing. That
Right.
was good. And that, yeah.
And that's the other thing too is we as humans, we tend to learn better from our mistakes than we do from our successes, right? And if you think about a sports team, when they lose that game, even if it's a close game, reflecting on what they did wrong on that. And I don't mean to sit there and brood over your mistakes. Learn from those mistakes, saying, okay, what did I do wrong here, right, to make myself better at what I can do next time I go out. And I was as a coach, those are the conversations that I would have, and then I would tell the guys, okay, let's forget about the loss, right, but remember the lessons that we learned, right, and then move on from there.
Yeah, I've got to way back. There's no losing. There's no failure, right? There's only achieving or learning. And if you can adopt that kind of mindset, I think that helps with being brave and being bold and building towards trust. It builds trust in your team, and you allow them to the la the leniency or the ability to go out there and be bold and try new things, and knowing that they won't get crucified for it.
Right. I think that's the thing that where when you start to have problems in an organization is when the leadership will crucify people for making mistakes, and then they lose that trust. And I hate to say it this way because it's the whole millennial versus whatever, but the whole like have a safe place for people to um to come in with their mistakes, the trust that they're not going to get killed over something simple or even if something major, right? And one of the lessons that I learned from my dad was, you know, when you have a problem, it's never the mistake that gets you, right? It's the idea of not owning up to that mistake,
Yeah.
is what gets you.
I think Clay Hunt, when I was going through that, really opened that up. Just that creating the safe space within the organization. The organization is a safe space. Or I hate to say me, I'm not the safe space, but you could come to me, and if you could be that leader that people bring their problems to, that speaks volumes of you and your leadership too. The ones that they're afraid to approach and admit, um, shortcomings or issues with, those are the ones you got to worry about. I think that's it's kind of a leadership failure if you have that barrier up where your people don't trust you enough to get to bring you their issues.
Yeah, it's been said in the past that people do not leave organizations; they leave managers,
Yeah.
and I think that same applies to what we do. Like I've seen many a good emergency manager leave an organization because they felt the leadership just wasn't supporting what they were doing, and it's sad when that occurs. But there's also the other side of that too: is what are you doing as an emergency manager to ensure that your voice is heard in that organization? You know, what piece of advice would you give to someone starting out in the field of emergency management when it comes to we're walking down this leadership path?
I think you got to be clear in your goals and objectives and what you want to achieve. You got to be I think you got to be bold and willing to um, make the hard recommendations, make the hard choices, and you got to be able to you got thick skin when it comes to people not receiving that well. But so I think that's it. I think you got to be trustworthy. You got to be bold, and you got to be honest and lead with integrity. Just and clear. Uh, you got to empower your people,
Yeah,
and then watch them flourish.
that is key right there. Uh, um, yeah, never be a well. I say this because this is my style, but never be a micromanager because I think once you start micromanaging, people don't make decisions, and once they stop making decisions, then now you're doing all the work, just having other people kind of do it for you, and uh, then they're not learning anything, they're not growing as a person, they're not growing as leaders, and Troy Lutrick, who is the vice president of IEM Region 9, we were talking the other day about the next generation coming up behind us,
Yeah,
and he's a retired firefighter, and he said, "Look, he goes, if we're not training the people coming up behind us, that's a failure on our part, right? So train our replacements." That's what he's saying. Train our replacements. I think that's critical that we should be constantly looking for and training those next generation that's coming behind us, and that's one of the reasons why I got into higher education, like why I love teaching. One of the reasons why in with my leadership style here with IAM Region 9 is that I'm looking for younger and new emergency managers to put into leadership roles so they can step up because without them, we this profession will start to fail.
yeah, and I think that's important to have that cognitive diversity within organizations. If you have too many if you're overstacked on that retired firefighter demographic in emergency management, the thought process seems to go one way. I think we got to have a good mix of old and new and experiences from all the different first responder fields. I think should be represented within there.
Absolutely. Hi, Mark. Hey, thank you for spending time with me this morning. Hey, what book do you have coming up next month?
Oh man, let me see. Did I bring it? I did. Hold on. Let's show you the picture.
I can
All
sing
right.
and dance as long as I can. There we go.
Angry weather. That's what's coming up. I want to look into I want to dive into climate change and its effect on natural disaster. And this book seems to have it's a forensics approach to a forensic scientific approach to climate change.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We're all going to be impacted by this climate change, and like I tell my students all the time, we might not be able to fix the climate change, but man, we have to be prepared for what it brings to our communities and to our jurisdictions. So, again, Mark, thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to reading that book as well and learning more. And you can always find more information regarding the books that we're going to be doing on the Leaders Cafe website and the uh, Baker's Dozen bookshelf. All right, Mike. I'll see you next month.
Hey, thanks, Todd.
Hey, everybody, again, thank you so much for being here with me today. Hey, if you guys are available today at 4:30, I'm doing the IAM Region 9 State of the region, and I'd love to have you guys join me there. That's the same bet right here on LinkedIn if you're here, or Facebook on IAM's Facebook, and hopefully we'll see you there. Until next time, everybody, please stay safe and stay hydrated.